So I interviewed my boyfriend, Kevin, and I wanted to interview him because a little bit of background. I'm in an interracial relationship, so he's white and I'm black. And I thought it'd be really interesting to interview him because I was certain that once I got to the question of bias, the questions 3 and 4, that his answers would be very different from my answers. And I also went into this asking him these questions without really explaining the background of this class, because I kind of wanted the answers to be just as honest as possible, which would in the same way kind of show the biases or the lack of biases he's experienced in his life. So I'm gonna show you I'm gonna explain to you his answers, and then kind of explain how I would have answered them as a black woman. So first, describe your ideal world. So he said, my ideal world is seeing everything it has to offer, seeing and experiencing all good types, all cultures and languages, experiencing other cultures, like overseas, abroad, and constantly traveling. This includes being around the brightest minds and the most talented athletes and the most successful people. So in his mind, when I'm like, what is your ideal world? He doesn't, the first thing that comes to mind isn't, well, I want a world where everyone can get along, a world where there is no bias against individuals because of the color of their skin or their background, the way they grew up. But I know for a fact, if I were to explain to him the background of this class and kind of the deeper meaning behind these questions, he would have answered them differently. And honestly, they would honestly be different answers, and that would be very genuine. But it's just interesting to see that the first thing that pops into his head, where if you were to ask me this question, I feel like even without knowing the background of this class, describe your ideal world, I would say, gosh, a world where, I could be seen as equal to, my white male boyfriend, or a world where, I could, be comfortable in my own skin. I could be comfortable wearing my hair naturally without feeling like I'm less than, or I don't look as good as, other people, because the world has told us that, straight hair is beautiful, or certain facial features are more beautiful than others. A world where everyone is just seen as, everyone is just seen as a beautiful individual. And that's something that I would say to the first question. And then for question 2, what are your deepest aspirations? He says, my deepest aspirations would be to capture many stories of the many people that I could come in contact with through digital art. So he loves videography, and that's a big hobby of his, and he's gotten really into it, and he specifically wants to know, he said, I want to know like the greatest minds of all backgrounds of people, and just, walk the planet with people that aren't like myself, and get to learn that way, because I want to become the best version of myself. So that was interesting that he answered the question that way without knowing the background of this class. Whereas if you were to ask me what are my deepest aspirations, I guess it would just be, my deepest aspirations would be to change the world for the better in any way I can. Not even go out and I don't even need to I don't know how I'm trying to say this exactly, but just change the world in whatever I do, even if that's, so me personally, I want to get into coaching. I love the sport of track and field. I'm very passionate about it, but I'm also passionate about making, people the best versions of themselves. So that's my deepest aspiration, is just to make people the best, individual they can be any way that I can. And then question 3, how do you deal with bias against you as a part of a particular group, and this was the most interesting question, or the way he answered it to me, because he said, personally, I've never experienced, bias based on my race or, my economic background. Like, that's never been something I've experienced. However, I have dealt with bias in a situation where he began to be very successful. So he said, dealing with bias is what you have to deal with when you want to be successful. Eventually, when you're successful enough, people decide if they like you or hate you, even if you haven't met you before. You have to learn to block it out and then just be the best you can be. So he's referring to a situation where in undergrad and in college, he's a very, very good track athlete, and he's been to multiple USA championships, and he's been at really high levels athletically in track and field, and he's experienced bias in the sense that people that he thought were his good friends or people that really supported him kind of began to be standoffish and get really jealous of him, and those are the biases that he's experienced. Where I feel like if you were to say to me, how do you deal with bias against you as a part of a particular group, I guess in today's world, those biases looking at me are almost obvious now. I feel like I don't really have to explain, the biases based on my physical appearance. And to be honest, I haven't experienced a ton of bias based on race, at least not in an intentional sense. I think we all have had experiences where people make comments to you that they don't necessarily mean any harm or disrespect by it, but we haven't taken the time to get to know people who are different from us. We haven't taken that time to get to know individuals that are different from us, so we wouldn't know that those comments or what have you would be kind of rude or disrespectful. And then question 4, describe your most memorable experience bias against you, if you're willing to share. I kind of prematurely explained the bias, but he brings up his track and field career. When he started, he kind of started to take off in track and field, and he could feel the envy from his closest friends, and paths start to shift, and I think he just really realized that you can't you can't expect everyone to be rooting for you all the time, even the closest people, because people have their own issues to deal with, and sometimes it's hard for them to see someone doing well, even if it's one of their closest friends and they're struggling. So he explained that bias, and that was the most memorable experience for bias against him. So yeah, I thought this was just really interesting, just of different sides of a relationship that we've been together for almost 5 years, so it's a really strong relationship, and we've had a lot of discussions, especially over these last 4 years. I guess more of the last 2 years, really deep discussions about this. But yeah, it was all just really interesting, and I hope you enjoyed my my initial post of my border crossing interview and report, and looking forward to feedback.